Do you know the warm progress under the stars? Do you know we exist? Have you forgotten the keys to the kingdom? Have you been born yet, and are you alive? Let's reinvent the gods, all the myths of the ages. Celebrate symbols from deep elder forests. Have you forgotten the lessons of the ancient war? We have assembled inside this ancient and insane theater to propagate our lust for life and flee the swarming wisdom of the streets.
Hello folks, welcome to Radical Communion 2008. I'm your radical host Peter Tocci, and we're recording in the fantastic new LATV studios on April 24th, 2008. All right, now I can introduce my gracious co-host, the perspicacious Mr. Giacomo Celli. Welcome, Giacomo.
Welcome, Mr. Tocci.
Thank you. It's good to be back,
Yes.
you know, especially at the new and much improved LATV studios.
Yeah, it certainly is.
And congratulations, by the way, to the staff for a magnificent job on the new studio. Yeah, we're here today and for 7 more shows to do a special series. And it's on bioterrorism and biowarfare and the roles that governments, military, and intelligence agencies play. I highly recommend that viewers record the series for reference and sharing. For a great history on this subject, it's hard to beat this book, which I've shown a number of times on Radical Communion, A Higher Form of Killing. It was published 26 years ago, so there are probably more updated books out there. But this clearly exposes the deadly game that's being played. Another favorite of mine, and more recent, and I've shown this before, is Death in the Air by Leonard G. Horowitz. And I sent a copy of this in December of 2001 to Congressman John Olver. I got an initial thank you, but that was it. Pretty typical of politicians when faced with radical issues. Now, Dr. Horowitz has made a copyright-free video documentary called In Lies We Trust, which I forgot to bring with me today to show you. But it will be the basis of our series, and as we've done in the past, using edited clips. The documentary is pretty long at 2.5 hours, and it has a tremendous amount of good information in it. But there are flaws, or what I consider snags and weak spots, so I can't recommend it without reservation. But I can say that the overall message is valid. And where questionable material remains in the clips, we'll note them as usual. Most of the clips are long, so Mr. Celli has graciously agreed to recreate his famous bobblehead role, and we'll we'll get along on that. Well, we'll have opportunities for short exchanges, and there's going to be a wrap-up show at the end where Mr. Celli can let off all his steam. Now, most of Dr. Horowitz's presentation is a deconstruction of a Health and Human Services information video called The History of Bioterrorism. And he names many names and multinational corporations. The reptile Henry Kissinger will be prominent, as will the Rockefellers. And as always with Radical Communion, we see these actors as elite or Illuminati operatives, and the chaos they create as the tactics of these ancient bloodlines for achieving their Orwellian agenda. And as we'll see, this includes slow and profitable genocide by creating illness. Now, I want to express my sincere thanks to our volunteer directors in the control room, Ed Visco and Tony Celli. And just want to note that please forgive some of the glitches in the editing clips that was done on my crude equipment at home.
Also Mike Gallagher, just want to...
Mike Gallagher too? Okay. Thank you, Jack. Okay, ground control. Launch clip 1.
Ground control to Major Tom.
Back in 1990, the story of Kimberly Bergella stunned the nation. She was the first of 6 Florida dental patients who said that their dentist had infected them with the AIDS virus. The dentist died of AIDS. Kimberly died, as have 2 of the other patients.
At that time, I was the chief professional advisor for the largest dental and medical catalog supply company in the world, Henry Schein, Inc. Early in my career, I published books and tapes using my knowledge of the behavioral sciences, including the Overcoming Your Fear of the Dentist program, and for this company, Dentistry in the Age of AIDS. By then, I had published dozens of scientific articles. Because of this case and my background, the company sent me on a lecture circuit between 1990 and 93 when I personally trained nearly 30,000 healthcare professionals in the psychology and clinical practices of infection control. But the government and my employer did not like my research. The controversy I created by publishing reports that conflicted with what officials were saying based on my use of the FBI's official methods and materials resulted in my corporate dismissal and blacklisting from lecture circuits of all dental and medical associations. Because of this, you might think I have an axe to grind, or that I'm biased against the government. Some people, especially health officials, dismiss my credibility because I began my career as a dentist, even though I received advanced degrees, one from Harvard University in public health, behavioral science, and 2 more doctorates since then. Hello, I'm Dr. Leonard Horowitz. What you are about to watch is a documentary critical of the roles national leaders, trusted medical doctors, and the Central Intelligence Agency have played in advancing the war on cancer, the war on AIDS, and now the war on bioterrorism. This controversial program examines the wars in which we have invested from an alternative perspective. The purpose of this film is to help explain how and why we have technologically advanced yet declined in health, freedoms, and quality of life. Currently showing on televisions around the world via satellite is the United States Department of Health and Human Services History of Bioterrorism. This program, featured in a new 24-hour preparedness programming network, was co-produced with the Department of Homeland Security with the CIA's involvement. It is said to be an educational encouragement to prepare you and your family for threatened, virtually impending catastrophes, especially bioterrorist and nuclear attacks. The network's featured documentary provides the opportunity to critically examine whether or not officials representing our government are telling us enough of the truth to make informed choices impacting life or death. Many critical choices now need to be made. The government explains this for your health and safety. Without honest information, your decisions might literally kill you or your loved ones. That's why this program is so important. This documentary provides honest messages, proven with visible documents, reflecting the most disturbing political and scientific history ever recorded. Controversial as this is, it is also sufficient for your needs to gain a balanced view that government officials are not providing, and be well informed and thereby empowered to make several life-saving decisions that health officials are now encouraging you to make.
Deedle-dum-dum, deedle-dum-dum, deedle-dum-dum. There was a turtle by the name of Bert, and the turtle was very alert. When danger threatened him, he never got hurt. He knew just what to do. He ducked and covered, ducked and covered.
He did what we all must learn to do. You
and you
and you
and you, duck and cover.
Be sure and remember what Bert the Turtle just did, friends, because every one of us must remember to do the same thing. That's what this film is all about. Duck and cover. This is an official civil defense film produced in cooperation with the Federal Civil Defense Administration and in consultation with the Safety Commission of the National Education Association.
If you are my age, you might recall during the 1950s and early 60s, school children throughout America were required to brace themselves beneath their desks at schools in defense of a Cold War nuclear weapons attack. I remember as a child how completely absurd this was in the event a nuclear bomb were to explode within 100 miles of my classroom, as I was shown repeatedly the devastating effects relayed by television and movie theater newsreels. The waves of destruction spread hundreds of miles around Ground Zero, leaving nothing but ashes and debris. Only recently did I learn that those civil defense procedures were generated by nuclear weapons industry leaders in collaboration with our elected officials, who pledged this defense of our nation was required to maintain the world's balance of powers, economic stability, and military might.
First, you have to know what happens when an atomic bomb explodes. You will know when it comes. We hope it never comes, but we must get ready. It looks something like this. There is a bright flash, brighter than the sun, brighter than anything you've ever seen. If you are not ready and did not know what to do, it could hurt you in different ways. It could knock you down hard or throw you against a tree or a wall. It is such a big explosion, it can smash in buildings and knock signboards over and break windows all over town. But if you duck and cover like Bert, you will be much safer.
This documentary examines the government's latest efforts to get you to duck and cover. It exposes the CIA and puppet politicians operating as prostitutes for multinational corporate criminals, behind whose policies for preparedness lies genocide.
Coming up next, discover how bioterrorism has been used historically and in the present on History of Bioterrorism. And actor Andre Braugher looks back at the biggest flu epidemic in history on Standing in the Safety Zone. Baltimore remembers the 1918 flu epidemic. And what every family needs to know about potential flu pandemic on keeping our children safe and secure. Pandemic flu and emergency safety preparedness. Coming up on HHS Network.
Here's a minor example of questionable info. The genocide definition is expanded for effect because enslavement is not strictly a part of the definition of genocide. Okay, go ahead, crew.
As you're about to learn, the real bioterrorists produce illegitimate programming called propaganda for profit. The real villains are those who spread fear and loathing for financial gain, power, and control.
Come to a place that's new and unique, a place of health, well-being, and preparedness, where connection leads to inspiration and empowerment. Come to the HHS. Come to the HHS. Come to the HHS.
To the extent that populations are being increasingly dependent, virtually enslaved, to drugs, called drug dependencies, the politics, policies, and profiteering of pharmaceutical firms and those who run them is genocidal. Most people realize that wars of any kind make money for arms dealers, industry manufacturers, and stocks, bonds, and futures investors. The wars against infectious diseases and cancers is no different. The war on cancer, the war on AIDS, the battle against breast and prostate malignancies, colon cancers, children's tumors, diabetes, and heart diseases is no different. Many industries and officials thrive off of this sickness. Could all of these declared wars, including the war on terrorism and medically frightening bioterrorism, be part of an economic and political ploy by inside traders or un-American traitors, wielding the mass media for deception? Let's see. In 1963, as the plot to assassinate President John F. Kennedy was being hatched, a global policy think tank met at Iron Mountain near Hudson, New York to discuss the possibilities for economic sustainability in a world without war.
Okay, he's talking here about the report. He's going to talk about the report from Iron Mountain. This is now generally considered to be a hoax, in that there was probably no actual meeting. but one man has come forward as the author now, Leonard Lewin, who was the editor in the original book. And of course, now some people say he's covering up for the group meeting, but there's no way to really know. So the important thing is that the report does accurately depict how these ruthless beings think. Okay, go ahead.
You may have heard it said that money makes the world go round. Well, most intelligent people knew at that time that war economies kept bankers and businessmen most profitable. So the big question asked and answered in the report from Iron Mountain on the desirability and possibility of peace regarded the possibility of transitioning into the 21st century, keeping growing populations manageable and large corporations in business. The participants at Iron Mountain considered the functions of war as necessary for political, economic, and social progress. The functions of war, they wrote, are, quote, essential to the survival of social systems we know today, end quote. Under political requirements, the report stated, a viable political substitute for war must posit a generalized external menace to each society of a nature and degree sufficient to require the organization and acceptance of political authority. In other words, a form of controlled life with threats other than large-scale devastating wars was considered. A way to control populations without destroying expensive infrastructures, roads, utilities, and real estate, as in past world wars.
Yeah, he mentions political authority in there, and we've noted on Radical numerous times that governments are elite inventions for the purpose of mass control. Now, the contrived wars and chaos and the threats, including the war on terror, convince people to keep authority in place. And that's why we say on Radical, the elite thrive on chaos. Thus, 9/11. And the Patriot Act, Homeland Security, and all that is just a protection racket. We can see with the assault on Iraq that preserving infrastructure is not really part of the program, as Horowitz suggested, because rebuilding is always half the fun. Okay, continue.
This report provided economic substitutes for war and suggested developing a comprehensive social welfare program and a giant open-ended space research program, both of which we have today. Political substitutes for war included, quote, an omnipresent, virtually omnipotent international police force, end quote. The current global war on terrorism assures this. And fictitious alternate enemies, about which this documentary speaks, is evident in today's focus on terrorism. But who are the deadliest terrorists, really? Do contemporary terrorists seek social control through a, quote, modern, sophisticated form of slavery? Ecological bioterrorism and human genetic destruction was also recommended by the report from Iron Mountain think tank. They suggested a, quote, comprehensive program of applied eugenics, end quote. That means genetically culling and killing perceived social misfits, or having them die from environmental toxicity. And the report's cultural replacements in science included, besides space research and social welfare, this concept of eugenic genetic control. In essence, these policy analysts, representing global industrialists, concluded that viable alternatives to traditional warfare could be made available to keep the world's economies going and the burgeoning populations controlled.
As in our Radical series, Beyond Treason, about the government and military abuse of our soldiers, we learned about the use of depleted uranium on the battlefield. And this is very consistent with the policies Horowitz names, in other words, genetic destruction and population control. And now we see Governor Patrick's ill-advised push for life sciences and the new medicine, biotech, you know. Now, the new medicine was defined as gene-based medicine, and that would be individually tailored for you to go right from the research lab to your body without all that messy FDA approval, apparently, even though That's often corrupted anyway. Okay, continue.
Consistent with the report from Iron Mountain, U.S. government records show a definitive genetics, eugenics, depopulation campaign was well underway by the early 1970s. Here, for instance, is a copy of a National Security Memorandum 200, which called for massive Third World depopulation. This was compiled by request of America's nuclear weapons guru, Dr. Henry Kissinger, the U.S. National Security Advisor under Richard Nixon, overseeing CIA, FBI, and foreign policy.
I do.
If you are wondering why we have both nuclear weapons and now biological weapons deployed around the planet, an investigation of Kissinger and Rockefeller is completely condemning. Read along with me this document classified by Kissinger concerning his plan to reduce third world populations. It reads, quote, "There is a major risk of severe damage to world economic, political, and ecological systems, and as these systems begin to fail, to our humanitarian values. The urban slum dwellers, though apparently not recent migrants, may serve as a volatile, violent force which threatens political stability. In international relations, population factors are crucial in and often determinants of violent conflicts in developing areas. And there is no single approach which will solve the population problem. The complex social, economic factors involved call for a comprehensive strategy. At the same time, actions and programs must be tailored to specific countries and groups."
Yeah, a great expose of tailoring genocidal policy to specific countries and groups is an article entitled "The War That Did Not Make the Headlines, Over 5 Million Dead in the Congo." This is by Keith Harmon Snow, January 31st, 2008, and it's published on the website globalresearch.ca. I got a quote from it here. Quote, "The International Rescue Committee in late January 2008 released a new report on the mortality in the war-torn Democratic Republic of Congo. However, the story of war and plunder in the Congo has been censored, manipulated, and covered up, even while it is ostensibly being told. In the IRC's tidy statistical equations, there is no recounting the ordeal of the millions of people who have disappeared into the swamps, tropical forests, the mass graves, torture chambers, and death camps, or after crossing borders. Amongst the overseers of the IRC is Henry Kissinger, whose interests run very deep in the Congo. Kissinger is tied to Freeport-McMoran, which is all over the copper and cobalt show in Katanga. Now, he mentions a few Kissinger cronies here. One, Freeport director J. Stapleton Roy was Assistant Secretary of State for Intelligence and Research under Madeleine Albright. Roy retired to join Kissinger Associates. Walter Kansteiner, a national security insider for Clinton and George Herbert Walker Bush, is the director of Moto Gold, operating in blood-drenched Ituri, Congo. And he's also a director, I want to run that one. Oh, by the way, W appointed this Kansteiner Assistant Secretary of State for Africa. Another Kissinger Associates Director, Belgium's Viscount Etienne d'Avignon, was directly involved in the operations that installed Mobutu. D'Avignon is also a close associate of Donald Rumsfeld through the biowarfare production company called Gilead Sciences, and we're going to learn more about them later on in the series. So continuing on here, the International Rescue Committee has a deep history of nefarious activities. It's a huge financial operation providing scads of executives and business people with scads of income in ways that do not help alleviate war or suffering, but rather exacerbate it. Amongst the IRC's biggest funders are HSBC Bank, GE, and Goldman Sachs. They're all involved in Congo's Blood Diamonds plunder. It's also funded by Pfizer and Gilead Sciences. So everyone should read this article for perspective. You'll learn something about Mr. Barack Obama, Whitey's servant. So go to globalresearch.ca, click on Author Index, and then find Snow, Keith Harmon, The War That Did Not Make the Headlines. Okay, continue.
According to Time magazine's managing editor, Walter Isaacson, whose biographies include Kissinger, having served the fledgling CIA as a Nazi hunter at the end of World War II, Kissinger was ordered to bring Nazis not to justice in the Nuremberg trials, but to America, to serve in high-level military and industrial positions. Here is the classified document showing his top-secret Nazi exfiltration program was carried out under the code name Project Paperclip. Chief officials in the Nazi Party ran a company called IG Farben. They were contracted with Rockefeller Standard Oil Company to develop rubber and purchase oil to gain the fuel for Hitler's war machine. Chief counsel and intelligence officer for the Rockefeller Standard Oil Company was, at that time, Allen Dulles. Here, from CBS News' award-winning correspondent, Paul Manning, from his timeless text, Martin Bormann, Nazi in Exile, is a photograph of CIA Director Allen Dulles next to IG Farben president and Rockefeller partner Hermann Schmitz. Among Paperclip's Nazis that went to work for the U.S. Navy was Eric Traub and his assistant Ann Berger. In 1951, Traub worked for the Naval Medical Research Institute laboratory in Bethesda. His work with Berger included investigating 40 strains of highly infectious viruses. Eric Traub was Hitler's top biological weapons developer. So America actually inherited Hitler's biological warfare program, and Kissinger knew all about it. 2 decades later, Kissinger was positioned in the Nixon White House by Vice President Nelson Rockefeller, who also appointed Henry to direct the Council on Foreign Relations study group concerning the deployment of nuclear weapons throughout Europe. This is how America came to develop, with the help of Kissinger and the CIA, its modern arsenals of nuclear and biological weapons. It was a sweet marriage between economic and political interests, government and private industry, directed secretly through covert.
Okay, I was supposed to say directed secretly through covert intelligence. So I don't know how much time we got left, but that's a pretty intense clip there. Okay, we're 28:15. All right, well, we got about a minute.
Well, we have a minute?
We have a minute. So, yeah, that's interesting, the connection between the Nazis and American corporatists. And that I meant to bring another book today called Wall Street and the Rise of Hitler, which details all the fact. So when talking about countries, it's deceptive because behind the scenes, it's one big cartel. And that company, IG Farben, was the hub of a huge cartel of about 600 companies that worked toward advancing the Nazi regime and planning and executing World War II. So do you have any comments there, Mr. Celli?
I guess if there's a market and you've got a product, you sell it to whoever wants to buy it in that market.
Yeah.
And, I mean, all is fair in love and war. What more can I say, Peter?
All right, well, I guess we can wrap it up for today, and I thank you, sir. And remember, duck and cover, buddy.
Duck and cover. Duck and cover.
O great creator of being, grant us one more hour to perform our art and perfect our lives. Moths and atheists are doubly divine and dying. We live, we die, and death not ends it.